Welcome to another episode of the Pilot Talk podcast by OSM Aviation with Captain Michelle Treskin and myself, Stein Mjotveit. We're two commercial pilots and flight instructors with a shared passion for aviation and the aviation industry. And the Pilot Talk podcast is made to entertain you, our beloved listeners who either share our passion for aviation or flying or want to get a peek behind the cockpit door. In this podcast, we will discuss flying, flight training, career advice for pilots, and other interesting topics from the exciting world of aviation. And in today's episode, Michelle, we have a very special guest.
We are honored to have the Mentour pilot, Petter, who's been a commercial pilot for 19 years with the same company. And he's got his own YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So it's a special guest. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. Like you said, Petter has a YouTube channel. He's a very well-known figure online. He actually went to OSM Aviation Academy back in the day.
That's why he's so good.
Yeah, it's a small world. We were called Bromma Flygskola back then.
God.
So it's a while ago, but it just shows that the aviation world is a small world. Petter does a lot of work with inspiring, informing youngsters and people who want to become pilots and get into the industry. So he's got a wealth of knowledge and experience. It's going to be great talking to him. And we hope you guys will enjoy this episode.
Enjoy.
You are listening to Pilot Talk by OSM Aviation.
Okay, so yet another episode of the Pilot Talk podcast. We are connected with Petter, Mentour pilot, as he's very well known online. Welcome to the podcast, Petter.
Thank you very much, Stein. It's a pleasure being here talking to you two distinguished gentlemen. How are you guys?
We're very well. We're so excited to have you on board here.
Thank you.
It's great.
Yeah. No, it's this is pretty much what I do nowadays. I talk to people.
Well, that's what we're going to do every day too, I guess.
Yeah, it's good that we can stay busy while we're locked down in our respective countries and quarantined. And I think that for a lot of people have actually requested that we have you on the podcast, Petter, because you're such a well-known figure amongst many aviation enthusiasts. So I'm really happy that we can finally make it happen. And but for those of you who don't know you from before, would you mind telling us a little bit about who Mentour Pilot is, how you got into aviation, and just give a little bit of background?
So Mentour Pilot, I'm a, as I not normally refer to myself as, my name is Petter. I am a 38-year-old airline captain. I fly for a large European company on the 737-800. I work as a type rating instructor and a type rating examiner, as well as a line training captain. And on my spare time, I do a little bit of YouTube work, which is probably why people know me. I've been flying commercially for coming up to 19 years soon now. So I started flying commercially when I was 20 years old, and have been doing it in the same company ever since. I don't know how far back you want me to go, Stein. I can go back until my earliest childhood if you want.
You can, yeah, feel free. Please do.
Now, aviation has not always been in my blood. Actually, when I was really young, 9, 10 years old, I wanted to be an archaeologist instead, which is pretty much as far away from that.
Wow. That's an extreme.
To the ground instead of up in the air, eh?
Yeah, but I think that probably has something to do with Indiana Jones being really popular when I was that age.
There you go.
Okay, I can see that then.
Yeah,
and then Top Gun came along instead.
Well, you would think that would be the trigger, but actually, my dad was working for a large insurance company up in northern Sweden, and his work area extended from Gävle up to, as far as you can go north in Sweden, which is an enormous geographical area. So he was driving in between the different offices that he had until he realized that, it would be cool if you could fly instead. So he took a PPL and he started flying on good days, and I had I was fortunate enough to be able to fly with him on some of those trips, and of course that's kind of started to lit the flame a little bit.
The bug.
Yeah, the bug was starting to come, but the bug really hit me when they saw my parents saw that I was starting to get interested, so they gave me one of these introduction flights for my 14th birthday.
Nice.
And I took it out on a September afternoon, nice cold fresh air, everything, like not the movement in the air. We took off with the Cessna 172. We flew over my hometown, did the standard stuff, did low flying over my house, things like that. And then we flew back to my home airfield, which is Örnsköldsvik, and I thought that Mats Hagenvall that's the name of the instructor, he was going to take over the controls at some point, but he didn't. He just kind of talked me through how to get into the traffic circuit and start selecting flaps and reducing the airspeed, and when it was all over, I'd landed the thing, and that was it. Then there was
then
no.
You were hooked.
Yeah, then I was hooked, and I had no way of returning back from that. So
and no regrets, right?
Absolutely, no regrets whatsoever. This has been an absolutely fantastic career so far. I used those years because I know there might be some young listeners listening here, and I take every opportunity I can to tell them that if you find out early that you want to get into any industry really, but this industry in particular, well, then use those years from when you're 12 until you are 18, when you can start to really go into flight school, by improving your grades. Check out which flight school you want to go to, if you want to go modular or integrated training, whatever suits you best, and really use the fact that you're young to find the path that suits you in the best way. Because that's what I did. I found quite early on that there was a government-sponsored program in Sweden, and I knew that in order for me to have a chance to get accepted into that program, I had to have the best possible grades, because they started finding people by looking who had the best grades, and after that they went into psychometric testing and so on.
Yeah.
So I went from an average. I would say an average student until a absolute top-notch student within 3 years, because I had a goal. I had something to focus on.
You had the drive.
I had the drive, and everyone else around me. I mean, you had far more talented people around me, people who had it easier for them in school. But I had the secret weapon, which was I knew what school was for. I knew what I was going to use it for. So I could take those extra hours sitting at home doing homework, really focusing for each test, because I knew that I need this in order to have a chance to get into this dream education that I wanted. Unfortunately, it paid off. So I managed to get in, and I did the training in what was
paid off.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, those are all wise words. I mean, you're giving the answer to achieving that goal.
Yeah.
You did exactly what you're supposed to do. You were driven, and you were focused, and you knew exactly where the light was.
Yeah. And
Fantastic.
I keep telling that to people, because a lot of people that contact me when they're young say that they can't wait until they can start flight training. But I say, listen, you have a few years now on your side to prepare yourself to become even better at what you're doing. So use time wisely, because time is on your side. It's not against you. So that's
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I managed to get into that program, and that was for a flight school called Bromma Flygskola back in the day, which then turned into what is now OSM Flight Academy. So I went to I don't know where you're sitting, Stein. Where are you now?
I'm in Västerås in Sweden at OSM Aviation Academy. So I'm in the old turf where you did your training. Well, you did it at Bromma Airport. That was before the move, right?
No. I did it there. I was in Västerås.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So I have that's where I did all my training.
What a small world.
I know. It is incredible. This is also something that's worth remembering for people that listen to this, that the aviation world is really small. It is.
It is. That's true.
Make sure that if you do that you are, if you do get yourself a name, make sure it's a positive one, because everyone will know who you are after a while.
Everybody. That's right. Yeah. Well, congratulations on your journey. You've worked hard and you succeeded, and look where you are now, man. It's great. It's great to hear a success story like yours.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
It's definitely been a journey.
Yeah. And those are the words that we praise as well, isn't it, Stein? When we talk about getting ready for the journey.
Absolutely, and I've done some work with Petter before, and the reason why we've collaborated on a few projects is mainly attributed to our similar vision of how what's important and what's important to highlight for anyone who is looking at the aviation industry, who's looking at the pilot profession. And obviously, we've gone for being enthusiastic about the profession, but also honest about the challenges that needs to be overcome, and what people can expect. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It takes hard work. Start early if you can. All these things that Petter are highlighting is really, really important.
Yeah,
and it's important to also say that once you've got the job, you still have to work at it. You still have to get in the books. You can't just ride along and be just like a passenger. No, you're working hard. I mean, you're always working hard.
Yeah. Like I literally came back in from my manuals now before we started this, because I'm preparing for my recurrent training, which
That's right.
Which this is going to be complicated in today's environment, obviously. But you just like you're saying, you need to continuously evolve. The day that you stop evolving, that's the day you should step out of the cockpit, really.
That's right. I totally agree with that. 100%. Unbelievable.
I think that's I always say this when we talk about aviation recruitment and both for pilot training but also into pilot jobs, is that the good pilot recruitment starts with the marketing, with the message that we put out there, that it's an honest message about what is expected of you. A lot of personal leadership, and like you said, Petter, going into the books, and like you pointed out, Michelle, it's a continuous journey. So that you can, so that the people that are attracted to the pilot profession are the ones that expect that and are ready to put in that work. And actually, what I perceive, and I'd be interesting to hear what you guys think, but a lot of the pilots, at least in my sphere, they really enjoy that. They enjoy the fact that it's a constant challenge, that it's a work in progress throughout the entire career, and that you always have a new level to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the key to success is it's in the attitude.
Yeah.
Being willing to
learn every day.
Yeah.
There's always something to learn about every time you go flying. Even though you've been flying the same airplane for 5,000-10,000 hours, it's always every day. It's a new experience. You always learn something, and you pass it on to whoever's with you, and you get criticism and you get feedback, and it's still all good.
Yeah. And they keep changing the procedures all the time. So you have to, no matter, even if you start learning the aircraft well, when you get back after a few months off, like I have now, you have a dozen FCIs, which are flight crew instructions, which basically change. Remember that thing that you used to do this way? You're not doing that way anymore.
We found a better way.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Pilot Talk with Stein Mjotvid and Michelle Treskin.
What do you see right now? Like that you're going to get back into flying now. We're a lot of recurrent flying and all that stuff. How do you see it coming or happening in the months to come, if we do get out of it? And how do you see how people are going to get organized and companies are going to organize for that?
So obviously that's going to be very dependent on the different companies. For example, if you work for a large airline with multiple bases and only a few simulator centers, it's more complicated than if you work for an airline that might have only one base where you have your simulator center.
Right.
So, so you're going to see, we're already seeing that the EASA is starting to give exceptions from the rules. Giving possibilities to extend OPC and LPC deadlines with a couple of months, providing that the airlines have applied and have a proper plan and a proper threat and error management plan in force for that. So that's what we are seeing. We have gotten in our airline an extension, providing that we do recurrent tests, as in written exams, and that we get an interview with the type rating examiner that checks that we have still the knowledge needed. In that case, we can get this extension for a few months. If we fail that exam, then we don't get extension and our licenses expire.
Wow. So you got to get in the books, just like you said. You got to review everything.
But this is no child's play. Like it's actually becoming more and more important because of the fact that we're sitting on the ground. Because if you have a machine, like an airline is like a machine, literally. If it keeps working and it keeps churning, then it keeps its components constantly oiled. But when it stops, when everything stops, and it stops for ages, then there are latent threats that could creep into it. And of course, the pilots being up to the job, up to the challenge, that is one of those threats. So that needs to be mitigated.
Yeah. We get rusty by sitting on the ground too long. And you're totally right. Absolutely.
And the airlines know this. They work very, very hard to make sure that that's not going to be an issue when we start working again, start flying again. The governing authorities, EASA, the FAA, they definitely know this because these are the ones that keeps the oversight. So like everyone is aware of this, and it's a threat that can be mitigated, but it needs to be taken seriously by everyone.
Yeah. It's going to be a big challenge, but it's good to hear that they actually are working on it on a solution by extending all those checks that need to be done. That's good.
Yeah,
good to
and
hear.
it's not. I mean, the OPC, which is the operator proficiency check, and the license proficiency check. Those are two things. But then you have medical, which is another thing, and you have these things that people maybe don't think about, like recurrent fire training, like security and emergency procedure training. There's loads of these things that keeps rolling in the background, and when you have a complete shutdown like we have now with pilots and cabin crews sitting at home, then all of these start to expire. But all of them needs to be in check the day that we come back. So if magically this thing would lift now and these things wouldn't be thought about by very smart people out there, well then the airlines wouldn't be able to start flying because everyone would be out of check. You know?
Yeah, so true.
It is very, very complicated.
Yeah. What a mess.
Yes.
When you look
It's
at
gonna
it,
be
the big
interesting
picture,
to-
it's quite a mess. Seriously.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be interesting to start it back up again because there's so many things that we haven't faced before. It's like for the maintenance technicians that are going to put these airplanes back into operations, they're they're looking at, okay, so this plane is going to be parked for 2-3 months, and then we need to start it back up again. Okay, let me look in the manual. Where's the manual for starting an aircraft back up after being parked for 3 months? There is none. Because they're not designed, they're not built to be on the ground for that long. That's the reason, why we put them into maintenance overnight so they can get back up and fly with passengers during the daytime.
Yeah. This is
You'll be taxing down the runway like this with the square tires.
No, but I actually did.
true, isn't it, though?
I did a video on this exact subject a few weeks back about just like the fact that you can, obviously there are mothballing procedures out there because you have the likes of the graveyards in the United States, for example, where people or airlines park up aircraft for very long time. So there are set rules for how long they need to go before they, for example, roll the tires to avoid flat spots and things like if you sit for too long, then there's going to be water gathering in the fuel tanks, and that can get fungi in it, which can clog up the fuel lines. So there are some real...
It's huge.
Yeah, there's some huge procedures that needs to be followed properly in order to do something like this, which is why at least my airline, I know other airlines as well, are trying to rotate the aircraft. So they still take them up and fly them and maybe every 2 weeks or so in order to keep them going.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best thing to do. Or else, like you said, if they stay on the ground too long, it's too much work just to put them back on the air. There's so many things to do. It's like an annual check every time. Yeah.
Lots of man hours to put them back in the air for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Well, the good news is that they're working on it, and they do have a solution on it, and they're a lot of prep is being done to get for that day that's going to come when the curtain comes.
Yeah. But it's like Stein said as well, that a lot of these situations we've never faced before. So it takes a lot of smart people from all of these different departments, technical, pilot, cabin crew, all of this, to work together to foresee what these problems are and make sure that they aren't a problem when the day comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be a challenge for sure, but it's one of the things about this industry. There's so many talented, hardworking, resilient people, and resourceful. People are drawn to this industry because you work a lot with problem solving and decision making, those kind of things. And yes, it will be completely different to restart than anything we've done before, but it's also going to be, I think, a lot of new lessons to be learned. And it's going to be interesting to see how we look back at this year. What we talked about a little bit before we started recording is like 2020. Let's take it back.
Yeah,
we don't. It's broken. We want a new year.
I'm not gonna look back at this
hindsight
year.
is 2020.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, hindsight's 2020. Oh,
That's right.
goodness.
No,
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, I think that we're going to be more resilient. We are going to be more prepared for things happening like that. I mean, I think it's going to make us a better human being and a better pilot as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a good insight there, Michelle. Do you miss flying, Petter? You've done some simulator work, I guess, now recently. Have you flown much these days?
No, I haven't touched an aircraft since February.
Okay.
So yes, I do miss flying, and I miss operating. I miss training, instructing as well. So it's fun to be off for a while. And to be honest, when you've been working like I have for a lot of years consecutively, it's nice to have a break. Actually, you do appreciate having a month maybe where you can leave everything behind you. But after that, then you start itching again. Then you definitely want to get back again.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see any obstacles ahead of your getting back into flying, or it's going to be not a breeze, but it's going to be you're ready for it?
As in, you mean my own personal?
Yeah.
Like I've never had a 3-month break before, and obviously now the first hurdle for me is going to be whether or not I cross the 90-day line, because if you've gone 90 days without doing and 3 landings and takeoffs, then I'm not allowed to fly. So then I need to get into the simulator. Unless EASA comes with some kind of extension to that as well. Now, professionally, I know that when you do get back from something like this, it takes a little while to get the cogs rolling again.
The gears to go.
Yeah, but I also know that it goes fairly quick. The higher experience level you have, the longer you've been flying, especially on the same type, the quicker you come back. I'm more like I am trying to come up with ideas for how to help the younger pilots, the pilots who haven't got that much experience, who might have just come out of line training, for example, and now have been sitting for 3 months without flying. Those are the ones that I think is going to need a little bit more help.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you with that. Yeah.
It's,
For us, it's like getting back on a bike. But for some younger people that don't have that kind of background experience, you'll have to get the training wheels back on.
Yeah, and once again, the authorities knows about this. So these extensions that I was talking about before, those are not available for new pilots. You cannot do that. You need to get into a simulator in that case in order to get the OPC or LPC running.
Yeah, we're facing that at the academy as well, because obviously, I say this to the student, I'm not too concerned about the students that just started, because they're going to graduate, in 20 months from now. And by that time, if recruitment hasn't started up again, at some level, we're facing way bigger problems. But obviously for those boys and girls, men and women that graduate now, that's not good timing. So what we've done is we look at and we're like, okay, so people come here to become airline ready pilots. The market's not recruiting now at all. People are being furloughed. What do we do? So we launched something called Project Resilience, where every student that graduated in Q4 last year and all of 2020 can come back every 2 months free of cost, fly the 737 as part of a crew. And that we'll be running that from September this year all through next year. Just to make sure, because like you guys pointed out, both of you've got a long career of flying, and you've got this so ingrained in your muscle memory. But like you said, Petter, for the ones that are coming straight out of flight school, we need to keep the wheels rolling for when the recruitment starts back up again. So for us, that's been a critical initiative. Obviously, we're going to add to it, tweak to it along the way as we see things that are working and not working, but that's a critical critical effort from our side, I would say, to keep our students fresh, to keep them current, to keep them ready for when the upturn comes.
Yeah, and the motivation, you got to keep them motivated as well. I mean, it's doom and gloom right now for them, for sure, and saying, oh my God, am I going to spend so much money for something I'm not going to get at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah.
You know, so you got to keep them motivated, and you got to give them something to hold on to, and and that's it. It's not the end of the world. It's going to happen. We're going to get back to flying, and not to worry, and get prepared and get ready.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to hear that you guys have done that, Stan, because we, as you know, we are now operating an entity called the Airline Pilot Club. Me and Andy O'Shea, which is the ex-head of training of Ryanair. We started that up as basically a tool to help find and train people from the population who might not have the financial means to become pilots. That was the idea, to find all this talent that is hidden out there and get them into the profession, because we saw that, you know, as the baby boomers goes into retirement around 2022, 23, and we have all of these orders on hold, well, then there is going to be a need for pilots. Now, we've kind of changed because of this ongoing pandemic. We didn't launch that part of it. We are still rolling on that. We're still working on it, but we've now launched like a page where you can go and access information, because of the access that I have to pilots and the access that he has to the industry. We've launched the airlinepilotclub.com so that people can go in and ask, like, what's going to happen to my training now? And I've just graduated. How, you know, what's going to happen to me? And then he has reached out to people, for example, in the airlines or in the EASA, to see what they're saying. And they came back. Actually, we did a blog post about this, saying that if you can get into a simulator at least every 2 months, right, and practice your MCC skills so that you can work with someone else and do a scenario. It doesn't necessarily, it's not so much the handling technique, it's more the multi-crew cooperation part of it. And Michelle, like you were saying, the motivation to keep studying, because if you have that every 2 months, well, in between that, you can keep your skills fresh. And you can,
that's right.
You can go and you can still see that light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm encouraging all the training organizations out there, and this is another thing we do in the club, to do exactly that, to take the responsibility and go out and donate this time to the students, so that they can get, when the wheels start turning again, they have the best possible chance to get into the industry.
Yeah, it challenges the training organization to do something about it.
Correct.
Absolutely, totally agree.
And now is as good as time as any, Petter. I didn't need much of a challenge, but when we were talking about this a while back, you sparked this idea. So, you know, thank you for that insight. And I think it's a fantastic, valuable insight. And I just want to give you credit for that, because we spoke about this challenge, and you mentioned something along those lines, and I was like, that's it. That's what we need to do. So I really hope that a lot of other training organizations follow that lead as well, because now is the time to step up and take responsibility and take action on where we can, you know, make a difference. Because like you said, we're going to get out of this. There's going to be, you know, the pilot need was huge before COVID-19, which means that there's going to be a pilot need on the other side of this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We just need to be ready.
Yes, and
we need to help them the best we can.
Yeah.
We do, and we also need to be very honest here and not try to bullshit anyone, because this is another thing that we talked about, Stain, when we had that conversation, which I'm really happy that you guys took me up on, is that there will be a while now, as it was after 9/11, as it was after 2008, the financial crisis, where there's going to be a slump in the industry. And anytime that happens, there will be pilots that are being furloughed or lose their jobs because of bankruptcies and things like that. These pilots, the more experienced ones, tends to be the ones that grabs the jobs first. At least the nice ones, the ones that maybe 6 months or a year ago, people were thinking about stepping straight into the right seat of a 737. Yeah. Well, then now maybe that is not going to be available for a year or two. But you need to be psychologically prepared for this situation. You need to think, okay, what do I do now? How, you know, what's my financial situation? If I need money, get a job, and I mean any job. I have friends right now, friends that are still working in the airline business, but can see this coming, who are already starting to take like driver's license for drive a truck, or starting a business to dig pools for people. And this is resilience, guys. This is what it is, and you need to have that if you get into this industry. You need to know that sometimes things are bad. And when those times comes around, you need to have a plan for how to get through that, because at the end, there is that 737 job. There is that right seat for you. But now maybe it will take a little bit longer than you thought initially.
That's right.
That sucks.
Yeah.
But do something about it. Do not sit down and feel sorry about yourself, because that you will be the only one who feels sorry for yourself. All the other ones are out there trying to sort the situation out.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive.
Correct.
You got to think about the future and say, and you're totally right, man. You're totally right. It's going to delay a lot of people into the right seat that they were expecting, but you got to do something about it.
Yeah, and
gotta,
I mean, this is
a plan.
This is exactly, Michelle. You know this as well. This is how we operate when we're in the cockpit as well. Like, you don't sit and fly to a destination and then find a thunderstorm there and be completely surprised by it. You know that on the briefing stage before, so that you've taken extra fuel and you know that there are alternates that you can go to. This is a similar situation, but in life. And,
exactly.
And you need to be able to take care of this, because believe you me, when it's time for you to go, and I'm talking directly to you who's listening now, when it's time for you to come to this interview, after this, it might be a year, might be 2 years, whatever, they're going to sit you down and they're going to ask you, so what have you been doing these 2 years? We understand that you've been furloughed. We understand that you haven't been working or whatever, but how have you kept your skills fresh? Why should we hire you and not the other guy out there? And you better have a good answer to that.
Yeah. You want to show initiative. You want to show commitment to achieve, to become a pilot. And it's one of those questions I ask when I go through a selection process.
Correct.
Tell me what you did in the last 2 years if you weren't flying.
Absolutely. Because it would say so much about you as a person when you say, like, okay, listen, I saw this happening, so I went back to the job that I had before. I managed to secure my old employment while still maintaining my my sim every 2 months, reading up on weekends, and this is what people who are going to employ you is going to want to hear. So
yeah, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very good point. Very good point.
Definitely.
Love it.
And we see we see a lot of, I think we're going to break all records for our flight instructor courses this year, because that's one thing, we're still doing flight training, and then we have, the demand hasn't dried up over a course of a few weeks like it has in the commercial air traffic sector. We still have training to do for the next 2 years, definitely, and beyond as well, obviously. But it's the direct short-term impact is not noticeable nearly, not at all compared to the commercial air traffic sector. So, and that's to me, I think that a lot of people are going to find a good path there. But obviously, that's not something that everybody can do, and it's not right for everybody either. But that's
But it will separate the men from the boys.
Or the women from the girls.
Or the women from the girls. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I'm gonna dare to guess that there's quite a few commercial pilots who've called you up to ask if they can do the instructor course as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've had that historically as well, but not as an overwhelmingly large number as now.
But that kind of goes to the point that I wanted to make, that people in the industry now, even if they might still have their job, or they might have been already lost their job, they will quickly go back to try to find something to feed their family, to do something. And if they can do it within aviation, that's great, because that means that they will keep their skills sharp for when it's time to go back into work. So it kind of it proves my point.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
it really
totally
does.
agree.
And I think as well, we've had, we've for a long time, we've really strived towards having a very good mix of instructors. We have those who do it full time, and we have those who do it part time and work full time for an airline, or part time for an airline, or vice versa. They do it full time here during an off season, and then they fly for an airline during the season. All that mix creates a really good dynamic among the instructor team, with many different varieties of experience from different types of operations. And right now, for us, many of those are looking to increase their engagement with the flight instruction part. which is very beneficial to the students, obviously. So, there's some upsides, but yeah, you're very good for pointing that out, Petter, as well. We're not, we tend to be a positive bunch. There's a lot of, but right now it's tough, and it will be for a while.
It is, and this is a cyclical thing. Like this
Mm.
happens from time to time. Sometimes it's really bad, like what it looks like it is right now. Sometimes it's less bad, but it looks like every 10 years or so there's some kind of cataclysmic event in this industry. And
true.
it's something that you need to kind of take into account when you're going into the industry, but also as you're working to make sure that you have ways to potentially deal with it. I have loads of and I'm sure, Michelle, you have the same experience as well, that you have loads of friends and colleagues who have gone through several companies, several bankruptcies before.
Yes. We almost all did.
Yeah.
It's part of the job, isn't it?
Yeah, because the airline industry is such a cutthroat industry. And if you start up a new airline and you work well for a few years and something small happens and you haven't built up billions of euros sitting in your bank account, well then, because of the cash flow issue, because of the amount of money that's slushing and disappearing, if you're not bringing money in, you go bankrupt very quickly. And that's what we're going to see now, obviously. All of the weaker players are not going to be able to sustain this unless they get government help, basically.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of operators are looking for that now, and also there are some funds being issued by but that's also a very interesting dynamic in the industry because it's a very global competitive industry when the industry is functioning normal. Yeah. And now when we're going into crisis mode, it is a very unfair market based on which nation your airline is operating from, because some airlines or some governments are going out with these support packages and grants and securities. The U.S. granted, what was it, $25 billion at first, and then they increased it to, I think, 50. Norwegian just secured a government backing of 2.7 billion Norwegian kroners. And SAS is looking to do the same. So many of these airlines that are, at least in Scandinavia, are looking like they're going to get support, because obviously in Scandinavia, the aviation industry or aviation is the way that we connect our cities. We have our countries are long stretched. It's hard to get between A and B if you're not flying without taking hours and hours to drive. And it's impacting a lot of other industries as well. Obviously, this is an aviation podcast, but aviation, and we mentioned this in the last, or not the last, but the one before that episode as well, that it has such a huge impact on other industries, for the travel companies, for the hotels, for the restaurants.
We're all connected in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's infrastructure. It's infrastructure critical.
Yeah.
So yes, there will be like this discussion. You will always have two sides of it. You'll have the very efficient airlines that have built up a lot of capital over many years because they've been smart and because they've had a good business model. Those now have a lot of money that they can feed from in order to weather a crisis like this, and they are making the argument that why aren't we getting any money when these airlines that are not as efficient, that haven't saved for a rainy day or whatever, depending on how you see it, they are getting money. And, you can see their point, but you can also see the point that you're making, which is, okay, we have these within brackets flag carriers, these legacy airlines that work from their base, they pay taxes or whatever, and employers' fees in their countries. And they work based on that. They maybe fly to cities, like you're saying, that doesn't necessarily make economical sense, but it is an infrastructural critical thing to do.
It's vital.
It's vital. And then they are getting money in times like this. So and it's very complex. It's very hard to say who's right in this. The only thing I want to see is that jobs are being saved.
Yeah,
so true.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Petter. It's not going to be an equity, an equal playing field. It just can't be. It's just way too complex. And I think the interesting thing that's happening now, I don't know if you guys saw, but Air France got a state guarantee, and they had climate goals attached to it.
Yes, very interesting.
That's very interesting, yeah, because now the in the middle of the crisis, everything is turmoil, and as you know, governments are moving in to save airlines. They're also saying, hey, you know what? We'll help you out, but you got to commit to doing these things for the
Yeah.
sake of the environment, which makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense.
I love that. I think
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
I think that everyone out there, everyone who's listening to this, and me included, knows that eventually we are going to have to start looking after this world better than we have.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
no question about that. So if we are going to ever do that, so far capitalism has completely failed that, because capitalism is always about the maximum gain, and the environmental issues always comes on the back foot on that. But if we are coming into a world where the taxpayers have to foot the bill to keep the airlines going, well, then it makes perfect sense to me that the taxpayers and that the states goes in and said, listen, in that case, you are to do these things to make sure that this actually works. Now, it will end up costing passengers money at the end. And it's inevitable that it's going to go down that road.
You're not going to get a freebie out of that one. No,
It's
you
a
got to
good
pay for it,
investment,
but it's a
though.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a good investment, though.
Yeah,
And I
it's a
think
good
that, you know, I think from an ethical standpoint, absolutely, there's no doubt about it. But I also think that it's going to make good business sense to take a very, you know, aggressive approach towards minimizing the climate impact, because the next generation of business travelers, of travelers in general, they're gonna choose the airlines that are the most responsible, that they take these things into account, that are trying to be as efficient as possible, and that are taking care of the planet, as you put it, better. So
Yeah, no. It's the way that we have to go. The change would have had to come at some point, as in that focus on being more environmentally sustainable. I mean, I have always said that the way forward when it comes to being environmentally friendly is not by cutting down and stopping all activity. It's by innovating. That's what we humans do. We innovate, we have a problem and we find a solution. Might be electrical engines or motors, as far as we can go. I know you guys are working hard on that aspect. Or it might be hybrid drives, it might be things like that. But that we can do that as much as possible. But in order to do that, there needs to be incentives. And getting a bailout on the premises of having to implement those kind of things into the industry might be exactly the kind of push that is needed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
totally right.
It's going to be interesting. I want aviation to be what it's always been, this fantastic, vibrant place to work in. But I do also want it to keep walking forward, to become something that is more environmentally friendly than it is right now.
Something good for the planet.
Yeah, and if we can do that through innovation, if we can push innovation into this and sustain jobs, that would be fantastic. That would be, you know, excellent. And I couldn't see that happening without a major change and without a major push for some reason. Because otherwise, we would have just gone back to, okay, what does the shareholders want? Well, they want maximum profit back from this. Right? Is it maximum profits to start trying these new technologies? No. All right. Gone.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on.
That's very well said.
Totally
Nothing
agree.
like a good crisis to snap us out of it, out of our lulling sleep.
To wake up people.
It's
eh?
like, come on.
You're totally right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It is like that. It's always been like that. Major changes to society have happened after crisis, like World War I, World War II, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
Right
I
on.
think that's a very good thing, a good note to wrap things up on. Let's use this
I totally
crisis
agree.
for something positive. Snap out, look at this from a helicopter perspective, see what we can do to further minimize our environmental impact and still connect the world. And very well said. And I think that for me, at least, this has been a very, very enjoyable conversation, as it usually is when I speak to the two of you. So I hope you guys feel the same. And
Absolutely.
I could
Quite an eye-opener
continue
for
for
me.
another hour if it's up
Yeah.
to me. You know, I love hearing my own voice. That's why I keep doing what I'm doing. So.
Yeah.
Great pleasure to have you on the show. It's great to have you. Well, I'd love to have you again. I'd love to sit down again and talk about aviation. It's such a great subject. And you got some great wise word that you passed on to our viewers and listeners, and God bless you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd love to come back.
Thank you so
I
much.
think that's a great idea. When these restrictions open up again and we're allowed to sit, less than 2 feet away from each other, then we should get together, have a meal, and record another episode. And
That'd be great.
yeah, sounds like a good
Sounds
plan.
great.
Okay, thanks for
Excellent.
joining us, Petter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All the
Bye-bye.
best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pilot Talk, available on iTunes, Spotify, or osmaviation.com/podcast.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to follow us, the Pilot Talk podcast, on Instagram for behind-the-scenes material. You can also send us messages, feedback, ideas, questions, anything there via our Instagram page. And we'll have competitions from time to time as well to give away free stuff. And as always, you can find the Spotify or you can find the podcast on Spotify. Yay. On Apple Podcasts and on Podbean and pretty much anywhere where you consume your podcast material. Or you can go to osmaviation.com/podcast and tune in your browser if you prefer. So on that note, until next time, blue skies.
Happy landings.
There you go.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.